Welcome to the narrative podcast of Untold Stories, a space where silence is broken, secrets are unearthed, and stories find their voice. I'm Dr. Crystal Ann England, therapist, storyteller, and guide for healing through truth. Through intimate conversations and courageous storytelling, to intergenerational wisdom, to identity, race, purpose, and power, this is a sacred space for the stories we were never taught to tell, but always needed to hear. Because healing begins when the story is spoken. Hello and welcome. This is the narrative of Untold Stories podcast. My name is Dr. Crystal Ann England, and today I have the pleasure of being here with my dear friend, Dr. Alex Gard. Dr. Gard is a mom of three. She's a private practice owner and a
maternal mental health specialist.
A maternal mental health specialist. Alex and I have known each other. Alex, how long was that we worked at? Almost 10 years. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So crazy to think, right? And so let's jump in. Alex,
Yes, thank you for having me, by the way. I'm super excited to be here. You inspire me. I think that you are amazing as a person and as a mother, as a therapist. Our paths have continued to cross in like crazy ways throughout the course of this decade. So this is kind of like a cool full circle moment. So thank you for having me.
Of course, Alex. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we were finally able, two therapists who are also moms trying to get it on the calendar, talk about impossible. But we made it happen. So
That's
so excited.
Right. For us.
Can we just take a minute for all the moms who are also running business?
They all know how hard this was. So yes, kudos to us.
So Alex, let me ask you, when you think about just the journey of what has led you to this moment, can you speak a little bit about what that journey has been for you?
Where does one begin? You mean the journey in becoming a therapist, a mother?
We can start there. So the journey of becoming a therapist, because I know you went to UF, right?
I did. Yeah, it's crazy to actually even really pinpoint that. I think the journey began when I was an undergrad student at UF. And, all of us therapists come to do this work because we've been through some shit. And I was an undergrad student, psych major, and there was this opportunity to work at the Alachua County Crisis Center. And I was scared to do it, but for some reason I was drawn to that. And I went and I didn't realize what I was getting myself into at all. I'm like a 20-year-old punk. I had no clue what I was doing. And I go and it's like this very intense process of basically training. And then they would weed out people every week. I think it was like 6 weeks of training. And then every week your cohort just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And then at the very end, there were like four men standing who actually made it to be actually the ones on the phones when you would call the crisis center. So that I think was the beginning of what led me to this. I think I realized that I had something in me then to be with people in their darkest moment. And that I just had something that I knew I had to like finesse and work on and pay attention to, because that experience was crazy. And then that's when I decided to do my master's. And then here we are all this time later.
Oh my goodness. And then going on to do your PhD, right? And what was that moment like? What helped you to decide? Because it could go either way, especially in our profession.
Yeah.
As an LMFT, you don't necessarily need a PhD, right? But what was it for you?
So I did my master's at UF as well in marriage and family therapy. And that program was life-changing. I really, I think back to that time and I'm so thankful that that's where I decided to go, because I kind of just was shooting in the dark. I thought, I know Gainesville, I know UF is a good school. I didn't really know what that program was going to be. And it was like probably the best thing I've ever done. So that was incredible in terms of like shaping the therapist I was becoming. And then I graduated with my master's, moved home, started worked at Pace, had an amazing time there. I mean, you know how rewarding and incredible that was. But it was, I think, being there, honestly, that I was like, I need to learn. I felt like I had so much more to learn, even with 2 master's degrees, even with a few years of experience under my belt at that point. it just kind of felt like I need to learn more to be able to be better for these girls, for these families, for the future people I'm going to be working with. And it was really inspired by that. I'm also a nerd. I like school. So I just felt really pulled to like, I need, like, it's unlimited, right? We're not in a profession where it's like you reach your cap and you're like, okay, I know everything I need to know. It's
Yeah.
not black and white. So there just felt like I don't have enough knowledge here. Like I feel like, so that was really that.
Wait, so Alex, you said you have 2 master's degrees.
So the way that yes, the way that it, for whatever reason at UF, you earn, it's a dual master's program. So
Amazing.
it's a master's you actually earn a master's in education as well as your specialist, which was marriage and family.
It's incredible. So, speaking of education, oftentimes in our field, when people get a PhD, there's usually in the back of the mind this idea of, will I be teaching? Has that ever been a call for you, a feeling for you that you want to listen?
So I actually graduated with a DMFT. So similar, in terms of the call to academia if I wanted it. Um, No, no, not really. I really enjoyed the little bit of teaching experience I had was running kind of like teaching, was running those groups at Pace. And I thought that was super fun. But I don't really feel, and I think that's why I chose the DMFT track, honestly, over the PhD track, because I really was in that program to sharpen my clinical skills and I wanted to be a better clinician. I didn't have so much interest in like the research academic side.
Yeah, no, and that makes so much sense. So then let's go back to PACE for a minute,
Yeah.
right? And community mental health. Boy, whew, I will never forget a personal experience I had at PACE. And I was talking to the girls and because I taught there for, with the middle school girls. That was how I got in initially.
I'll never forget it.
And I remember, I forget exactly what I was teaching about, but I was telling the girls, like, oh, when your mom comes and rubs your back when you're sick. And the girls were looking at me like, your mom
Mm,
rubs your back when you're sick. And I was like, yeah, like if you have a fever or you're not feeling well, your mom comes and she makes you food and like rubs your back. Or if you're hurting somewhere, she'll massage you. And the girls were like, miss, my mama don't massage me. I was like, wait a minute.
I know.
And at that moment, it occurred to me, like, I have a lot of privilege
Mm, yeah.
because often we think of privilege as, the big house or the big school or all the money, but seldom do we think about the privilege of just having a mother who rubs your back when you're sick.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, Alex, right? Like, do you have any of those little moments where you had to
Mm,
go, oh, as much as I can say about my life, whew, this is a moment.
yes. Constantly. There's probably so many that now that you're bringing this up, I kind of like want to sit with that and think about all of the moments that I probably had over the few years that I was there. But there's a few that stand out. There was one particular middle school girl that I know that if I said her name, you would remember her.
I already know.
And I remember we were sitting in my office one day and she looked at me, and in all seriousness, she was not saying this to be cute or funny or um, she was talking to me about a particular event that had occurred in their house the night before. And it was, it cut me open, the story of what had happened and these things that these girls had to endure and then come to school the next day and then act like everything was fine. And she's telling me this story with like such bravery. And I'm getting choked up listening to this story. And she's telling me about it, like just as if she's talking to me about the evening weather. And I'm getting choked up. And then she sees me and she says she's concerned about my emotion. And then we kind of just sit there in like a moment of silence. And she says, you're going to be a really good mom one day. And it made me choke up even more. And then she followed that through with saying, I wish I had that. And I think what she meant was someone that listened to my story, someone that cared about what I had to say, and someone who was a witness to my words. And there was something so powerful about that moment with her. And then she would go on to make jokes later about how she wanted me to adopt her and all this stuff, and I wish I could have. I probably would have. But I think, yeah, that it brings tears to my eyes thinking about it now. But there were so many moments like that that made you feel yes, aware of your own privilege, but also so purposeful in what you were doing that made sustaining community mental health worth it for like what happened in that room. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what comes to mind.
It does. I always battle, and then I'm wondering how you feel about this too, Alex. I always battle with the ideas around community mental health because I think, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of not so great things that happen in community mental health. I mean, I'm sure you have too, even in that particular
Oh, yeah.
organization, right? But then going back to all of the incredible little moments that do happen,
Yeah.
right? That make it all worth it, that you say, okay, well, yeah, there are some things here that like every institution, there's politics, there's all kinds of stuff, that unspeakable things that we don't even want to think about or talk about. But then there are incredible moments with
Oh,
people
yeah.
who genuinely are just looking for something to hold on to make sense of our humanity.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And those girls, I mean, and I know you feel this. It's like, yeah, we showed up for them, but I feel like they gave so much to us too. And I know that it was this reciprocity of like we had an impact on them that I know they're carrying, but also the impact that they had on us.
Yeah.
And it's that was such a special. I don't know if it was the environment, it was that particular group of girls, but it was such a special experience being there. I miss it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's few places that I hold with nostalgia in my mind when I think of community mental health.
Yeah, right? Yeah, my job before that, not so much, but yeah.
Right? But that place for sure, and I think you're right, I think it was, and even if I think about all the people who even worked there too, there were just
Mhm.
so many amazing, incredible women who were there as
Yeah.
teachers, as counselors, as administration, who genuinely were there for the cause, and that is hard to find in
Yeah,
community
that's not
mental
common.
health at
There
all.
was, like, a moment there where I feel like it was really, like, the dream team of the managers, the teachers, the counselors, like, everyone had a big heart and was kinda there for the right reasons, and yeah, that's not the norm.
Yeah. So how has that now shaped you, Alex? And when you think about this impact that you are trying to create within your own private practice, how have you carried that residue into your practice now?
I'm happy we're having this conversation because I feel like I need to carry it more into my practice. I think that it's easy to kind of get, I don't know if like lose sight is the right way of phrasing it, but kind of like pulled away from. I think we were doing human work. We were just doing human to human work. We were showing up every day and giving of ourselves in a way that in private practice it's set up so different. Not that it's not human work, of course it is, but I think you're in relationship to people differently, but as we're talking about it, I feel like I actually could borrow more from the real human presence that I think that environment allowed us to have. And I think one of my gripes with private practice is that the way that it's set up is this 50-minute a week. It's supposed to look a certain way, right? It feels more formal where that felt more human. So as we're talking about it, I'm like, that's a great question, Crystal Ann. I probably should really allow myself to show up more in that way because it was just us being us and it had such a profound impact versus all of the systems that tell us that therapy has to look the way it's supposed to look.
This buttoned up, like, hello, how was your week? All right, let's talk about your goals. Right. So,
Yeah, I have to be effective and right, I have to be able to write this in a note about what I've done or the effectiveness that I've had. And right, I think that expectation of us as therapists robs us from that ability to show up more human. So this is actually a great reminder. I'm glad we started talking about that because when I talk about it, it lights me up inside. And I feel like I don't have many opportunities to connect with that, you know?
yeah. But I think that that's just it, Alex. In private practice, it can feel like you're on an island, and occasionally you get these visitors. Oh, at 1 p.m. so and so will come, and
Yeah.
3 p.m. so and so will come,
Yeah.
right? But then the in betweens, you're back to your island where you're alone. Whereas
Mhm.
in community mental health, it literally is community.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
sometimes you would have two or three girls in your office at one time, and
This
even
used to be my favorite.
right? And even those conversations were profound.
Yeah.
Being able to kind of being a little bit of a fly on the wall, listening to the way that they talk about their life and be like, girl,
Yeah.
you'll be noticing a lot of things. I didn't
Mhm,
realize that you
mhm.
were paying attention the way you were paying attention, and being able to have those opportunities where, yeah, we're just humans sitting in a room
Yeah.
talking about life.
Yeah. And even back then, I remember feeling like the pressure of that. Like, is this okay? Like, and they would love that, right? They would all come in. They would love to be 3 or 4 of them in my office at a time, just chit chatting. And now looking back with maybe a little bit more wisdom, I'm a little older now. Looking back, I'm like, wow, that was so therapeutic, even though someone watching probably wouldn't think it was therapy. But it was so therapeutic because they felt safe enough to be themselves in that space. And I wish I could go back and tell like novice me, like, hey, this is actually amazing what you're facilitating. Oh, but I think if I was honest, there was probably a voice in me like, ooh, is this allowed? Is this, is this helpful? Is this appropriate that I have 3 or 4 of them in here and we're just talking about life? And, now looking back, I see it totally different.
But Alex, you bring up a really great point, and this is something that I struggle with a lot, especially in my private practice. I have always been and will always be a rebel to the cause. Okay. But this idea, when we think about therapy, when we think about what is therapeutic, right?
Mhm.
And all of these things that we have to adhere to appear as if we are delivering a particular service in a particular way, fashion, and all of these things. And it's always made me question.
Mhm.
Let me give you an example. During the pandemic, when everything was happening and I started my private practice, or no, shortly after, I started doing walk and talk therapy.
Mm.
I found that for a lot of my clients, it was extremely helpful, especially for those who had severe anxiety or ADHD. Just being out, they were so much
Yeah.
more insightful when we were walking. They didn't have to sit in front of me like this, staring at me, and then trying to find,
Very uncomfortable for a lot of
very
people.
uncomfortable, right? Especially for those clients who have trouble with allowing themselves to be seen, right?
Yeah.
So when we were walking, they are telling me all these things that maybe I hadn't been able to tap into before.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a moment where I'm like, I wonder if I'm going to get in trouble because this is not therapy,
Yeah.
traditional
Totally.
therapy, right? And I would do a lot of things like that. I even had kids where I would tell their moms, "Hey, bring your child to the park," and I would bring a basketball, and that was 45 minutes of us playing basketball
Mhm.
and therapy, right? And again, the insurance company might be like, "What is this that you're doing? This isn't
Right.
therapy," right?
Yeah.
But I struggle with that, Alex, because I think so much that I've learned now in being in private practice is that therapy does not have to be this calculated thing that we read about in these fucking books.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really sitting with that lately. It's a big part of the reason that I left the group practice that I was part of for all these years to go out on my own so that I could explore more of these. Cause I agree with you. I think that's beautiful what you did with the walking and the part. Like, that's so awesome because that's just you being you. And yeah, not everyone benefits from what we think of as traditional therapy. So I love that. And I love testing the limits on that. But I've been really sitting with that lately. And it was a big part of the reason I started incorporating the postpartum home visits into my work. Because again, that is something that is so necessary. And I know you've had 2 kids and we've talked about what it's been like to have struggles postpartum, both of us. I think back to like what it would have been like for me when I was in the thick of my postpartum and I didn't even know what the hell was happening or why I was feeling that way or what the hell I needed. What it would have done for me to have someone come and just say, "Hey, I'm here. Let me hold the baby." Let's go for a walk together. Let's just sit on the couch. Just a warm, calm presence that didn't try to fix whatever was happening for me, but just was there
Mhm.
to alleviate whatever I didn't even know I needed alleviated, which is kind of the whole idea of why I decided to launch these home visits because as you know, when you're in the trenches like that, especially with your first and you're suffering, but you don't even know sometimes how to ask for that help. And it's too overwhelming to even think of leaving or setting an appointment to go talk to someone again in a stiff office, sitting across from them, you're bleeding into your freaking diapers that you're wearing. And now you're supposed to open up about your feelings. Like, is that really it? Is that what we're offering women? So, yeah, I agree. And that's one way I'm trying to kind of create a space that isn't traditional. Um,
Yeah.
and I would love to create other ways too, you know?
But I love that, Alex, because you're so right. It, I think if I had had that, if I had had a therapist who came to my house after I had given birth to my first, I
Hmm.
don't know that I would have had the postpartum depression as bad as I did, right? And that postpartum anxiety, I probably would have found the tools and I would have been able to recognize it before it got out of hand.
Yes. Yeah, me too. And that my postpartum anxiety was pretty debilitating. And I'm realizing now with my third baby and now having a completely different experience with her, luckily, that what I needed back then was someone to co-regulate with. I didn't have that. So my anxiety was out of control because there was no one to come in that could ground me. You know, my husband going through this for the first time, he doesn't know what the hell is happening. He's working all the time, you know. And a lot of my friends didn't have kids yet. There was no one to really come in and just be like, I see you. This is going to be okay. I get what you're going through. Here's how you're going to get better. You know what I mean? And just right. So, yeah, I think my experience would have looked very different too had I had that.
And I love that you're doing that because, it brings this idea to my mind, Alex, that I talk about so often with my clients about the tribe. A
Hmm.
lot of times we think that our tribe has to be our family. I don't know about for you, but some of the people in my tribe that would be my family, they don't ground me.
What if you don't have the village? You're just supposed to suffer silently without anybody coming in to offer support. Yeah.
And
So I
when
think that's part of it too. No, go ahead.
when we think about the way that it used to be, right?
Mhm.
And let's be honest, the way that it used to be is kind of the way that it should have been and was intended to be. So when we talk about the tribes, we're actually talking about literally the way we used to live.
Actual literal
Yeah.
tribes. Yeah.
Right?
Literal community. Yes. And never in history have parents parented in isolation. Never in history have two people raised children alone. And then we wonder why parents are burnt out and struggling and having marital issues and right. So that's also something I'm hugely passionate about and was what's also been a motivator for not just the maternal mental health work that I do, but then also in facilitating these postpartum home visits is that I know this is a crisis that we're facing.
Yes. And I think this is a perfect segue, Alex, as we're talking about community and as we're
Mhm.
talking about the tribe and the village, of sharing your story of how the village came together for you after this complete tragedy of what happened.
Mhm.
So, can you share a little bit about what happened that just kind of blew up your world?
August 3rd of 2022, we had a house fire that displaced us for 13 months. My house was deemed a total loss, and it was, at the time, obviously extremely devastating. The whole story of what happened that night was very intense because I actually wasn't home. So, but my kids and husband were. So I was actually out to dinner with a friend when I got the phone call that there had been a fire. My husband, Danny, was so distraught that all I could understand was that there was a fire, but he was so distraught in how he was communicating to me that I had no idea. Like, was my house burnt to the ground? Are my children alive? He was telling me that they were, but part of me, like, didn't even believe him because I knew, right? Like, if he tells me that they're not okay, how am I gonna make it home, you know? So, that was the story of me finding out. I mean, that car ride home. I mean, I left the restaurant, I threw my shit on the floor, I ran out, I didn't pay the bill, went to my car, called my parents, hysterical, like, there's been a fire," I couldn't even breathe, and then pulling into my neighborhood, it was so impressionable. You would have thought, I don't know, like 20 houses burnt down because there were so many fire trucks. I mean, dozens. And they lined the street my neighborhood is kind of like, it has, like an entrance with like two walls. It's like walled off and you couldn't get in. Like they were blocking it. And I remember parking my car in the middle of the street, getting out and running. And the police officer was like, "You can't go in there." I'm like, "It's my house. It's my house." And I just start running. Shit was flying out of my purse. I lost my license, like stuff's flying. And I'll never forget turning the corner to my cul-de-sac. And there's so many people sitting outside, so many fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. And I saw my house. And I just weirdly, my instinct was to walk towards it, even though the garage was still on fire. And I remember there was this firefighter who was like an angel, and he put his hands on my shoulders and he just like gently walked me away from the house. And I just kept saying, "Are my kids okay? Are my kids okay?" And he's like, "Everybody's fine. Everybody got out of the house." And he just like sat me down on the floor. And I'll never forget him. I remember what his face looks like. But wow, it was pretty impressionable to see that.
So what is happening in your body at that moment, Alex? Like as you're
Ugh.
sitting there on the floor looking at this garage that is still in flames, what is going on in your physical body?
I don't even remember. I think I went into kind of like a state of shock. Also, my daughter, my middle child now, but at the time she was the baby, was 10 months old and she was in an ambulance. And so that I was like so weirded out by that. And I'm like, why do they have her in an ambulance? But I think at that point, I was just trying to orient to safety. Like, I just wanted to see the kids. I wanted to see Danny. I wanted to see the dog. I remember all like my neighbors coming around me, back to the sense of community. My neighbors were so incredible that night, but even in the aftermath of the fire, dropping off, I remember that night, I think it was that night, neighbors just coming with like bags of clothes and bags of food and just, stuff for the kids, toys for the kids, and just like dropping off all this stuff, like doing whatever they could to help because couldn't go back inside. So they were incredible in like that night, but also in the months that passed as well. But I think all I cared about in that moment was just seeing my kids and seeing Danny.
How did that, because I'm trying to imagine as a partner pulling up to that, having that situation of just as a mom in general, it's so hard when you make decisions to take time for yourself, right? So then to have made the decision to go to dinner, to take time for yourself,
Yeah.
and then for this to happen, Alex.
Yeah, it was, that was the ironic part of the whole thing, that it was actually a really big deal that I stepped away. And not just that I stepped away, that it was like I went to dinner at 8 o'clock, which is late.
Girl, that's bedtime, okay?
So it was a big deal that I left. It was also kind of a big deal for me at the time that I left for dinner at like 8 o'clock at night. But like this kind of leads so yeah, that was ironic, but this kind of leads into a lot of the blessings that came from the situation, which is one, that my car wasn't in the driveway. Had my car been in the driveway at the time that this happened, my car would have exploded because the flames literally extended to almost the street.
Wow.
So my car would have been blown up, which who knows, that could have caused what it could have caused to my neighbors, to more damage to the house. Who freaking knows? I don't know what happens when a car explodes, but my car wasn't there. So that was one of the blessings. And Danny's car was parked on the side of the house, which is also odd. So that was like one of the things that night we were like, oh my God, thank God my car wasn't there. It was like the first of those things that you start to realize were actually blessings in a way. But yeah, I think the part of this whole story that makes me the most emotional is not talking about like what happened to the house or, talking about what happened that night. Yeah, for sure stirs up some emotion in me. But that it wasn't until later, I think, when we had gotten to my parents' house, because we went and slept there that night. And Danny got home after dealing with the fire department and all of that, that he came home and I didn't even know what happened. So when he told me the story of how he was alerted to the fire, and to this day, that's like what chokes me up, because without our neighbor who came and told Danny that the fire was even happening, Danny would have had no clue. He was going to sleep. My girls were already sleeping and he was calling it for the night. He was only alerted to it because our neighbor came and banged on the door until Danny basically came downstairs and was like, "You got to get out of your house." And Danny's like, "What are you talking about?" Because our garage is detached. So we have a 2-story house, but the garage doesn't have a second floor over it.
Okay.
So he had no clue. There was no smoke in the house
Mhm.
yet, whatever, but the garage was fully engulfed in flames at this time. But then Danny's like in shock. And so he tells Danny, like, "Do you have kids?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You need to get them out now." And so he went, helped Danny get the kids out of the house. So it's the part that I think I felt very I felt very dismissed, I think, by a lot of people in the aftermath of what happened because it was a lot of like, well, at least everyone's okay. What's important is that everybody's safe. And yeah, like obviously, of course. But I think people with good intentions really dismiss all these other things that were happening that were not just what happened that night that was traumatic, but then thinking about like what could have happened
Yeah.
because that played in my head over and over and over. Like what would have happened if he didn't see and he didn't knock on the door? The fire was so close to like when you saw the house after, it was so impressionable. But you saw that the fire started to come into the playroom from the garage and started to make its way up the wall. And it was inches from getting into Avery's room. I mean, inches, seconds, minutes to where she slept. And so you sit with that of like, what could have been? And of course, I'm so grateful, but I felt very alone in feeling that pain and that agony over what could have been. And I felt like no one understood that I was going through that. I just kept hearing platitudes of like, oh, well, everybody's safe and, you can rebuild and almost like you don't have reason to be
Yeah.
bad about this.
Yeah.
So kind of like,
But it
snap
didn't
out.
happen, Alex. So thank God, right? Like it didn't happen. What are we not realizing again, like back to the humanity of it? As a mother, the way that that plays on your mind, like you said, that all the things that could have been, if just
Yeah.
one thing would have been out of place, the way, if that man would have did something else that night, went somewhere
Yeah.
else that night, right? Like all the things that could have.
Seen it 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
I mean, so many things, right? Had I not gone to dinner, like all of these things play in your head. And that was very intense. Um, and I felt really, it was really hurtful when a lot of people and people close to me kind of would meet me with that. Like, oh, you have insurance money. So, and I'm like, I just lost my house. I just lost my stability. Like, I can't bring my kids home. And I could care less about this stuff, but we lost almost every single thing that we owned. And that was so low on the list of what I really cared about. But still, it's like our home, like anybody's home, was our safe haven. It was at the end of the day, the place I could go to no matter what. And it was losing that. And that's what I felt those 13 months that we were out of the house. Like, I just want to go home.
Yeah.
Like, I just want that sense of safety and that this is just my space. And that part was really hard. And I wanted to give that to the girls. So, yeah.
What do you wish that people would have said instead? Because even, right, it brings my mind right now into even thinking about Hurricane Melissa and what's happened to people in Jamaica and people in Haiti and people in Cuba. And I keep hearing this very thing. People keep saying, at least you're alive. At least you guys are okay now, right? Like,
Yeah. There was, I'll answer it with this because this is what came to mind and was really meaningful when it happened. There was a moment where, so Danny and I, and again, back to like the things that people don't realize had to happen,
Yeah.
we had to come back to the house the next day and move out. So basically, and imagine there's fire people in here, there's people touching my stuff. I mean, my jewelry is out. Like you feel so invaded and there's people going through it was awful. And you're deciding what to throw away, what to keep. I mean, the front of our house was a giant pile of all of our belongings. Mostly everything had to go because if it has fire damage and it's like, like like you can't see it, but like your headboard is material. You can't keep any of that. And so we're going through there, which was extremely difficult the next day. And everything is covered in soot. Everything's covered in water. And we're going through everything. And I was covered in sweat, throwing shit out in the front. And this neighbor who I wasn't close with, and we're close with a lot of our neighbors, came up to me and she's crying. And she's like, I'm so sorry that this happened. And she comes to hug me and I'm like sweaty. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like really sweaty, whatever. And she embraces me with like the warmest embrace. And she just starts crying. And she's like, don't worry. You don't have to do this by yourself. Like, we're going to help you. And I think it was that I needed to hear from everybody. Not be grateful, not at least your kids are alive, but like I got you. Like you don't have to face this alone.
so powerful, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Because when, again, tribe and community, your
Yeah.
presence is really all people need. Even if she would have just came and hugged you and sat with you and started going through the stuff with you, right? Sometimes it's just,
Yeah.
come sit, like, I'm in the shit. Come sit with me in the shit.
Yeah. And she didn't really know me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made it so powerful too, is that it felt so genuine, like her, you know, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. And I'll never forget the people like her that continued to show up in the aftermath of all of that, because it made it possible to continue going through it.
So now that you look back, right, on all of that, what do you take away? What have you kept?
My gosh, so much, so much. One of the main things is I realize now that the fire didn't come to destroy anything. It came to clear the path in major ways. I could talk about this for a long time because I've sat with it for 3 years and I feel it now more true than ever. But I realize how necessary, it might sound weird, but how necessary it was that that happened. I see it as something that was necessary that protected us. Mine and Danny's marriage at the time was not in a good place. After having our second baby, we were going through some hard times in our marriage. And I think that I know that the fire forced us to come together in such a profound way that we are a million times stronger than we were before going through that. There's been a lot of growth on both of our parts as people since that happened. And then I think as a couple too. So I think there's been a lot of really beautiful things that have happened under the pressure of that situation.
Yeah.
So for that, I'm grateful, but I'm also like, I know now that it needed to happen.
Yeah. And of course, there's always that part of us that says, like, okay, Lord, but could you have done it in a different way? Right? Like, did you really have to do it? I mean, because that was
I mean,
dramatic, right?
at the time, I couldn't make sense of it. At the time, I was like, why? Like we've already been through so much. Things have already been hard. Like, why? It was very like, why the hell is this happening to me? Now I see it different. And there were so many, I have to tell you, like when I think about it, it's like full body chills. There were so many miracles, legit miracles that happened in the process of that fire unfolding, that there's no way I could have gone through this. And not that I wasn't a believer before, but there's no way that you go through something like this with the miracles that happen and not see God's hand in every single piece of it. And that is really profound. And even when I think back to it now, I'm like, holy moly, like we were protected and guided and cared for every step of the way.
It's interesting, Alex, because when you say that, I can't help but wonder, where are you now when you think about your spirituality and God's hand being in everything, and just knowing without a doubt that there's no way that to fathom the idea that all of this is a coincidence, right? Like, oh, life, God doesn't exist. Everything is just a coincidence. Like, what is it in you that has allowed you, now that time has played out and you've seen all these miracles, just to know, like, how could I not believe?
Yeah.
Can you give examples of the ways that there's just no doubt in your mind?
So I can definitely give tangible examples. But, I think that to answer the first part of your question, that going through that and then noticing the miracles that happen along the way helps me to this day with my nature of being controlling and type A. So when I start to notice myself being pulled back into that way of functioning, because I like to say that I'm in recovery, I think back to some of those things that happen and I'm like, he's got it. I don't need to try to control this. This may not be happening on my timing, but it's not my timing, right? And so it helps me relinquish control.
What is something that one of the miracles that you think of and you're like, oh my goodness gracious, the way that this happened. There's no way. There's no doubt in my mind.
Okay, well, there's two that stand out.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll tell you three. So one was, so the fact that we got back into my house in 13 months is actually crazy. Like it really should have been longer. Our house was considered a total loss. Permits are a nightmare, especially in Plantation. They're like notorious for being very slow. So we were living in an apartment, which down here ain't cheap. And we also, our mortgage this whole time, we were paying the mortgage, even when our house was unlivable. We still had to pay our mortgage, even though we weren't living there. So obviously that's stressful. We have a kid in private school. We have a nanny. This is a lot. It's a lot for anybody to continue now. Now we have the apartment. So like the first like blessing was when we went to go find this apartment. Ironically, I picked one that was called The Rise. That was the name of the apartment building, which I find very ironic. And they had been running this like special, this promotion. And then I saw it online. And when we went, they're like, oh, this expired. And it was like, I think it was pretty significant. Like your first 2 months of rent were free or something.
Wow.
And they're like, oh, sorry, it's over. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. We went to like sign the papers. And then I told the girl the story of what happened. And she got so moved by it. And she's like, I'm going to honor that for you. And I remember just like that, again, humanity, and just her doing that just felt like such a hug, and just like, okay, like this feels more bearable now to do this right now. And so there was that piece. The other crazy piece was that living in that apartment, you could walk to certain restaurants, and we go to dinner to this restaurant that had opened. Danny wanted to go. I didn't even want to go. And he's like, we're going. And I was like, okay. So we go with the kids. Carson's at 10 months, 11 months. She's crawling all over the table. We were in a booth, and the booth sat touching another booth. And she kept bothering this lady. And I'm like, I kept saying sorry. I felt bad. She was like touching her head and like, being
A
a
10
little,
month old.
yeah, like, they're trying to eat, and the lady was super nice. So we're getting up to leave, and she's staring at me. And I thought she's looking at me because she's like, thank God they're leaving. It's so annoying. And she stops me and she's like, I know you. And I'm like, you do? And she's like, is your husband a firefighter? And I say, joking, because I'm a smartass, I was like, no, but we just had a house fire. Haha. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's it. And I'm like, what? And she's like, I remember you. So our neighbor that alerted Danny to the fire received like essentially an award, a life-saving award from the city of Plantation. And we went to the ceremony with our whole family. This beautiful angel of a woman is, at the time was, but she still is, a council member. So she sat on the board and remembered us from that night. And so then we start talking. She gives me her number. She's like, if you ever need anything, let me know. And as we're leaving the restaurant, I swear to you, I can't make this up. I said to Danny, we're going to need her. We're going to need her. And I know it in my soul that somehow we're going to need her.
Yeah.
Fast forward 6 months later or whatever it is, permits are taking forever. Our lease is going to expire. I'm like, I don't want to live in this apartment another year. Like I was dying to get back home. And they're telling me like permits are going to take months longer. I call her. And little do you know that she is the only reason that the permits were expedited, that the process moved along like in freaking 10 times as faster as it normally would have, all because she made some phone calls. So she was literally the reason that we got back into our house and didn't have to sign another year lease.
Alex, it is mind blowing the way that God just along
Isn't that,
journey.
Chris, this restaurant was giant. It was like a freaking cheesecake factory. And here's this woman, we're sharing a booth, recognizes me, my kid's touching her head the whole time, gives me her number, and then and I say that to Danny, we are going to need her. And then she is the instrumental piece that got us back into the house. Like, tell me to doubt that. Freaking crazy.
Wow.
And now I need to reach out to her because I think about her all the time.
I even think about the work that we do. And I'm almost positive that you probably feel this way, but the amount of stories that I have the blessing to bear witness to, and when I hear stories all the time, and I see the way that God's hand, even like your story, the way that God is just instrumental, it is crazy to me how people cannot believe. Because I'm like, the Lord is literally infused. You don't even have to look very hard.
No, you don't. But I mean, when I tell back these things, and there's other things, there's other things that happen too. Namely, and I'll tell you really quick, that also is just like, so obviously we learned a whole lot about insurance. How would we know any of this shit? Dealing with the insurance and what coverage you have, and we were first time homeowners. So we learned in this process that we didn't have, I forget the name now, whatever the insurance is, part of your insurance, homeowner's insurance that covers if there's like a disaster or something that pays for you to live elsewhere. So apparently we didn't have that. I don't know. So the apartment thing was kind of stressful, and I remember just being okay. And that's something that I got from, I think a really positive thing I've gotten from my dad, who's, a child to immigrants. Like, you just figure it out. Whatever happens, you just figure it out. And so that was my attitude with the whole thing. We'll just figure it out. We have savings. We'll just figure it out, make it happen. But it was stressful, and And I remember like working out at like my cute little apartment gym, and I get a phone call from the adjuster who up to that point had been such a royal pain in my ass. So I'm like annoyed picking up the phone, and I pick up and she's like, Alex. And I'm like, what? She's like, you're never going to believe it. And I was like, okay. She's like, I found you, which still to this day, there's no explanation. No one can explain it to me. She never explained it to me. She just said, I found you $35,000. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, we found you $35,000 for your apartment. Just like that. And there's still to this day, no one has explained to me where, how we got that money. Yep. Yet another one. I could not believe it. And she was just like, yep, deposit it in your bank account tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, our insurance company, okay, here's another one. I'm telling you, this is great. Our insurance company at the time went under. Like whatever the proper term is, like bankruptcy, whatever it was, they just went under. So they stopped writing checks. So not only were we one of the last checks that they ever wrote, or else it would have gone into probate, they gave us our full policy limit, which apparently is like an unheard of thing.
Yeah.
So we were told by our next insurance company, like, do you guys know how lucky you are? Because you were literally one of the last checks that they ever wrote. So had we not gotten that money, who knows if it got tied up in probate, how long that whole process would have taken. So yes, another miracle.
Wow, Alex.
Yes, incredible.
So you mentioned something earlier about how this entire situation changed your relationship with Danny, right? Your
Yes.
marriage. And I'm
Yes.
wondering, now fast forward 3 years after, how have things changed for the two of you? How is your relationship?
Marriage is really hard, and we've been through it, but I think the beauty of our situation is that we've gone through things like the fire and some other things that have been really hard, but we've always chosen each other at the end of the day and have continued to figure out how to be who the other person needs. I think there was something about the fire brought us closer together for sure, because that kind of shit will bond you. But there was something about having Presley, or my third daughter, who's now 8 months old, that really crazy, because I wasn't intending on having a third. She happened miraculously, but we weren't planning to expand our family. And at the time, I was like, holy shit, like, how are we going to do this? Like, life already felt crazy. We already had 2 small girls. I'm thinking, holy shit, how is this going to be? And I remember something I do for my spiritual practice is I do Reiki. Sure, you know that. And my Reiki lady was like, she's going to be a grounding force for you guys. And I'm thinking, how the hell is a third baby going to be a grounding force? Get that spiritual mumbo jumbo out here. Okay?
Where did you get your certification, ma'am?
Okay. But she was 100% right. And there was something, and the reason that she was right is because there was something about having this third baby that I think forced Danny to level up in a way that he didn't have to before, because I overfunctioned. So I could overfunction. I know that's deep, but I could overfunction with 2 kids. Couldn't do it with 3. So she has been grounding, because it forced him to show up in a much different way for our family that I really needed, that we all really needed, that he really needed. And so that has been like a really awesome shift for sure.
So hold on now, Alex. Mom of 3, private practice owner. Ow. How are you showered, clothed?
Just left my group practice of 9 years. So what were you saying? How do you
do it? How do you juggle it all? Because, I mean, being in private practice on its own is like a child, right? And I think people often think, you have a private practice. That's amazing. That's incredible. What they don't see is that you are the secretary. You are the social media market manager. You are, right? Like, once you have your own business, there's no 9 to 5. It's 24/7.
Yeah. It's intense.
So how are you juggling all of these different responsibilities now?
Thank God for my own therapist, who I love so, so much. She's a wonderful human. So I prioritize my own therapy, which I always tell clients, know a therapist that doesn't have a therapist, that's a problem. Like, you need to be in therapy if you're a therapist. So I love her. She really helps with my self-care and, keeping me grounded and helping me continue to work on myself. Thank God for my friends who I can be honest with, who I can call and say, I hate everybody today. And they're like, yeah, me too.
Girl, same.
Like, thank God for that. Working out, really more than like the physical, it really mentally, I need it. I need movement. I need to work out. I need to move my body. It really helps me with just maintaining some sort of sanity. I think those are the main things. I think also as my relationship with Danny, I think has gotten stronger and evolved over time. I think that also helps me continue to be able to pour into the things that I need to pour into. And then my girls, they, as crazy as life is and as demanding as life is, and it's like there's something so powerful about kids that if you allow them to influence you this way, their presence is really magical. And I really try to pay attention to that, meeting them in their world versus expecting them to come to our world. And when I do that, it is kind of its own weird self-care. So I think those are the big things.
Alex, this has been such an incredible pleasure to be able to sit down with you and to talk and
Yes.
to I appreciate you so much, and I know that so many people out there are going to hear your story and resonate deeply with so many different parts. And I appreciate you having the courage and taking the time, because I've always felt that the most important thing that anyone can give you is their time. Again, mom of 3, business owner. Your time is golden. So I appreciate you so much, Alex. This has been
Thank you.
amazing. To all the people out there, please, Alex and I didn't even scratch the surface. Like, this is a grain of
No.
sand on the beach. There's so many other things that I know you guys want to know about Alex. So if this episode has resonated with you and you want to hear more, I would be so happy to bring Dr. Alex Gard back on.
Yeah.
And if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate. Alex, we wrap up now, because speaking of sessions, I know you got to jump on a session in a minute. What would you like to leave the people with?
What's on my heart is that it's never too late. It's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to tell your story. And it's never too late to make a change, even if it's something that you've thought about for a long time. It's the most courageous thing you can do. I'm not speaking as like a therapist and a client, but therapy has changed my life for the better. And so I would just encourage someone who's listening that if they've thought about it, maybe they've been sitting with it for a while, it's never too late to reach out.
It's never too late. So thank you again, Dr. Alex Gard. And I am so looking forward. Again, tell the people where they can find you, Alex. Where can they find you on social media?
So my Instagram is Dr. Alex Gard and my website is dralexgard.com. So pretty easy.
Perfect. And I will also have it down in the show notes for you guys, so you can just click on it and go straight there. Again, thank you, family, for tuning in. This is the Narrative of Untold Stories podcast, and I am so grateful to have you guys here.